The eggs burned because I was staring at the wall. The toast popped up minutes ago, untouched, curling at the edges. The coffee sat cold in the pot. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't even awake in the normal sense. I was just there, in that kitchen, breathing in betrayal like it was the only oxygen left in the room. I keep replaying it, word for word. That one sentence. You don't deserve my affection. Not in a fight. Not after something cruel I said. It wasn't a reaction. It was a statement, said with the same calm as ordering a side of fries. Like it had been living inside her for months, just waiting for a quiet moment to step out and shatter everything. The night before, we had watched a movie together. We even laughed at the same scene. I tucked her blanket around her feet like I always do. I kissed her forehead when she started to fall asleep on the couch. I thought we were okay. Not great, maybe, but okay. That morning, she sat across from me at the table. She stirred her tea. I offered her half of my bagel because hers had burned. She didn't even lift her eyes. And then she said it. Just like that. No emotion. No warning. No apology after. I think I smiled at first. The kind of smile people wear when they've just been slapped but aren't sure it really happened. Then I asked, "What?" And she repeated it. Slower. You don't deserve my affection. My ears started ringing. I think the teabag wrapper fell out of my hand. I blinked 4 times. Maybe 5. She stood up, rinsed her mug, and left the room. I heard the bathroom door close. That was it. That was the moment my marriage hit the iceberg. I sat in that chair for hours. Didn't even realize the eggs were burning. All I could think was, how long had she been holding that in? How many nights had I sat next to her on the couch while she silently thought I wasn't worthy of love? And if I was so undeserving, why was she still here? I didn't sleep that night, or the next one. Instead, I made a quiet decision. I would stop giving her what she said I didn't deserve. No more morning coffee waiting on the counter. No more drive safe texts when she left for work. No more folding her laundry just the way she liked it. I stopped remembering her favorite show schedules, her allergy meds, her little rituals before bed. I didn't do it to punish her. I did it because I had nothing left. At first, she didn't notice. Then, she noticed too much. She started asking questions like, "You okay?" And "Why are you being weird?" And then, she started staying out later. That's when I began noticing things too. Unfamiliar perfume clinging to her coat. A second glass of wine on the credit card receipt. Laughter, real, glowing laughter that I hadn't heard from her in years, echoing faintly from the other side of the bathroom door as she texted someone she wouldn't name. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself it was stress. Then I saw the message on her phone. One sentence. A different sentence. "I missed the way you touched my wrist last night." It was from someone named Drew. And I knew exactly what wrist they meant. That's the moment the air in the room went solid. And that's the moment I realized I had become the ghost in my own marriage. But ghosts remember. And ghosts can still burn everything down quietly. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't throw the phone, didn't scream, didn't even move. I just placed the device back on the charger where I found it, sat down on the edge of the bed, and stared at my own hands. My skin felt numb, like it didn't belong to me anymore. She came out of the bathroom 15 minutes later. Hair damp, cheeks flushed, towel wrapped high across her chest. She didn't notice the silence in the room had changed its shape. She didn't notice me sitting there completely still. "Hey," she said softly, like nothing had happened. Like my world hadn't just fractured along every line. I answered with a half nod. That's all I could manage. I didn't trust my mouth to move without giving away everything. She climbed into bed, pulled the blanket up under her chin, scrolled on her phone for a while, and eventually turned away from me. Her screen glowed against the wall. A soft, private light. I lay down slowly beside her but faced the other way. I wasn't going to watch her smile at someone else's words again. My eyes didn't close. They couldn't. Instead, I started thinking back. Not to the bad stuff, but the little things. The long walks to nowhere on Sundays. The way she used to lean into me when she laughed. The notes she used to leave in my lunchbox back when we were broke and happy. Had it all been fake? Or had I lost her gradually, like a slow leak in a tire I kept refilling, pretending it wasn't getting worse? I needed to know more. Not because I wanted to hurt myself, but because I needed truth. I'd spent too long feeding off hope, off assumptions. No more guesswork. So, over the next few days, I paid attention. Not to her, but to the patterns. The schedule changes. The silence. The deleted call logs. The nervous glances at the door when she got home. One night, She told me she was going to a friend's art show. Said she might be late. I didn't follow her. I followed the bank notification. She had used our joint card for an Uber at 9:17 p.m. I checked the receipt. Drop-off, Wilmot Avenue. That wasn't anywhere near the art district. That was a residential block. I plugged the address into Google Maps and stared at the little red dot on the screen. My thumb hovered over the Navigate button, but I didn't press it. I wasn't ready to see it, not yet. Instead, I waited. I waited until she came home that night at 11:52 p.m. I was in bed pretending to sleep. She slid in next to me like she had done nothing unusual. But I could feel it on her skin, the distance, the guilt, the lie. It clung to her like a new perfume. She whispered, "Good night," and I whispered nothing back. That's when I knew this wasn't going to be about confrontation. Not yet. I needed more. I needed her to keep thinking I was asleep at the wheel. Let her keep weaving her story. Let her walk into her own trap. So I played the ghost better than ever before. I made her breakfast the next morning, just like I used to, with cinnamon on the oatmeal and a sliced strawberry fanned out on the side. She looked surprised, almost guilty, but she smiled, and I smiled back. Nothing in my eyes betrayed me. Not yet. She left the house humming that morning, but I stayed behind and called the number I found in her call history. I didn't expect him to answer, but he did. "Hello," he said, and I said nothing. He waited a moment. Then he asked, "Is this her husband?" My heart stopped. He already knew who I was. And that's when things stopped being quiet. That's when this story changed direction entirely. He didn't sound like a stranger. That's what struck me first. His voice was soft, deliberate, like someone who'd already played out this conversation in his head 100 times. He didn't stutter. He didn't hang up. He didn't even pretend not to know who I was. The moment I stayed silent after he said hello, he filled in the blanks himself. "Is this her husband?" My breath caught. I hadn't prepared for him to sound calm. I expected panic, or deflection, or at least an awkward pause. But this man, whoever he was, knew exactly who I was and didn't flinch. I should have said something clever, or angry, or something that put him on the back foot. Instead, I just muttered the word, "Yeah," like I was admitting something I didn't want to be true. He sighed on the other end. Not dramatically. Just like someone exhaling weight. "I was wondering when you'd find out," he said. That sentence felt like a slow slap across my entire body. I sat down in the hallway, legs trembling beneath me, my back against the wall as the phone pressed harder into my ear. I could feel the static bleeding through the speaker. My throat felt dry. I didn't know what to say. "How long?" I asked. There was a pause. Then, in the most irritatingly gentle tone I've ever heard from another man. "4 months." 4 months. She had been kissing me goodnight, going on late grocery runs, blaming work deadlines, while spending nearly half a year sneaking around with someone who didn't even feel ashamed enough to lie about it. My vision blurred. I didn't know if it was anger or sadness or both, but the room started to tilt just a little. I asked him the next question without thinking. "You in love with her?" He didn't answer right away. "I thought I was," he said. "Until last week." That stopped me. "What happened last week?" He hesitated. "I saw a photo of you two on her mantle. Wedding photo. The way she talked about you." I realized something. She never stopped being your wife. Not really. I was just filling a space she didn't know how to talk about. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to break the phone against the wall and storm into our bedroom and demand answers. But all I could do was listen, because this man, this stranger, was saying things my wife never had the courage to. "She told me you were cold, that you stopped paying attention, that you didn't care anymore." But the more I asked, the more I realized she was describing herself. "Not you." I couldn't tell if he was trying to console me or himself. "I told her I was done," he said. "Last Thursday." That was 2 nights before I saw the message on her phone. "So why is she still texting you like nothing happened?" I snapped, the anger finally breaking through my voice. He cleared his throat. "I blocked her yesterday. I haven't responded." My brain was spinning. My wife wasn't just cheating. She was unraveling, and she didn't even seem to notice that her affair was over before I knew it began. I hung up without saying goodbye. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the phone. It clattered on the hardwood floor as I sat there, stunned. The hallway felt too quiet. The air too clean. The house, our house, felt like it didn't recognize me anymore. I stayed there on the floor for almost an hour, thinking, trying to gather pieces of myself, wondering if I was still a husband, or if I was just the last to know I wasn't. When she got home that evening, I was already back in the kitchen, calm, measured. I smiled at her when she walked in and asked how her day was. She blinked, unsure how to respond. Maybe she sensed something was off. Or maybe she was just shocked I still remembered how to smile. She didn't know that her affair partner had already burned the bridge behind her. She didn't know I had already spoken to him, that I knew everything. And the most dangerous kind of man is the one who knows everything and says nothing. That night, while she slept beside me peacefully, dreamily, I wrote her a letter. 1 page, neatly folded, tucked under her phone. What I wrote will stay with her forever. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was upset, but because I had clarity. The kind that stings your throat and keeps your hands busy. I sat at the dining table long after the lights were off, lit only by the yellow spill from the kitchen range hood. A cup of untouched coffee sat to my right, going cold like everything else in my life. I thought I'd feel rage. I thought the words would pour out in a burst of fury, but they didn't. They came out slowly, carefully, like I was carving a headstone. I didn't call it a goodbye letter. I didn't even sign my name. But I knew what I was doing. I was handing her something she couldn't control, a mirror, not a message. Here's what it said, almost word for word. You told me I don't deserve your affection. You didn't whisper it. You didn't stumble over the words. You said it like it was a fact, like it was written in ink somewhere. You probably thought I'd protest, that I'd argue for my place, that I'd beg. I didn't. Because in that moment, I realized something. Affection given out of pity isn't love. It's charity. And I don't want to live in a home where I'm a charity case. So, I've stopped earning what you've stopped giving. You don't need to look over your shoulder for an explosion. I'm not here to punish. But I am done volunteering for a role that no longer exists. You haven't noticed yet, but I've already begun disappearing. And by the time you do, there won't be anything left for you to hold on to. I folded the letter cleanly in thirds. No smudges, no tears on the page, no angry underlines. Just clarity on paper. I slid it beneath her phone on the nightstand and walked out of the bedroom, barefoot, feeling the cold tile under my soles like I was walking on the edge of a cliff. The next morning, I pretended nothing was different. She woke up late. Didn't look at me. Didn't say good morning. She always checked her phone before brushing her teeth, like most people do. But this time, her hand paused the second she touched it. I was in the kitchen when I heard the paper unfold. Then silence. I poured coffee. 5 full minutes passed. I counted each one by the ticking sound of the cheap wall clock we kept meaning to replace. She entered the kitchen with the letter still in her hand. Her face was unreadable, half like she wanted to scream, half like she'd swallowed something sharp. You wrote this, she asked quietly, holding the paper like it had burned her fingers. I looked at her. Just looked. Then turned back to the sink. She asked again, this time with more bite. You wrote this to make me feel guilty, huh? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She hated that. Hated the silence. She wasn't used to me withholding anything. I had always been the emotional one, the one who spilled out his feelings like coins on a table. And now she stood there holding the emotional equivalent of a closed door. I never said I wanted a divorce, she said, trying to regain control. I said something harsh. You're making it into this big thing. That was the moment I realized she hadn't changed. Not really. Even when cornered, she was still shifting blame, still protecting her own version of reality. I talked to him, I said calmly. Her face dropped. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just let that single sentence echo across the kitchen tile and settle into the space between us. You talked to who? She said, though she already knew. Drew. And just like that, the color drained from her skin. She blinked rapidly, trying to read my expression, trying to figure out what I knew and what I didn't. He told me enough, I said. More than you ever did. She opened her mouth, closed it, then walked out of the room. I thought she'd leave the house. I thought she'd slam the door, drive off in the car we still technically both owned. But she didn't. She went upstairs. For 20 minutes, I didn't hear a sound, and then I heard her sobbing. Not the loud, dramatic kind. The broken kind. The kind you try to stifle behind both hands. It didn't bring me relief. It didn't feel like justice. It just felt late. Too late. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. There was still one thing left I hadn't told her. Something that would change how she remembered every moment of the last few months. I hadn't planned to keep it from her. It wasn't some master plan or revenge tactic. I hadn't even thought about it as a secret. It started as something small, too small, I thought, to matter. And then it grew. Quietly, invisibly, like a crack in drywall that you don't notice until the entire wall shifts. That morning, after she went upstairs and sobbed into silence, I stayed in the kitchen with both hands wrapped around a lukewarm mug of coffee I never drank. The letter had started something. I could feel it. She'd been cracked open, but not all the way. And part of me still needed her to see it. Not just the betrayal. Not just the damage. I needed her to see me. The me she had erased somewhere between the laundry cycles and her secret texts. So I told her. It was a few hours later. The silence in the house had gotten thick, like fog. She'd showered. Her eyes were puffy. She didn't come near me, but she didn't avoid me either. She was floating somewhere between guilt and defense, waiting to see what I'd do next. I went to a lawyer, I said, casually, like I was talking about groceries. She turned around from the hallway mirror slowly. What? 3 weeks ago, I added. I didn't sign anything. Just wanted to understand my options. She blinked. Why didn't you tell me? I was waiting to see if you'd notice anything was broken. The way her mouth twitched made me wonder if that was the first time she realized I had been hurting long before I saw Drew's message. I wasn't reacting to her affair. I was reacting to years of neglect that finally had a face. But I didn't file anything, I continued, because I didn't want out. Not yet. I wanted something else first. What? I reached into the drawer next to me and pulled out a small black notebook. She recognized it immediately. It was the one I kept in my nightstand. She'd never asked about it. Never cared. I opened it slowly and handed it to her. Read the dates, I said. Read the notes. She didn't take it right away. Eventually, she reached out like it might burn her. She flipped to the first page. The entries were small, one per page. Each one a timestamp and a memory. Like March 14th, she touched my back while I was doing dishes. First time in 11 days. March 29th, she asked how I slept. First time in 3 weeks. April 6th, she smiled at my joke. No physical contact, but it felt like a crack of sun. She flipped through more pages. May 4th, she came home smelling like a different soap. No eye contact. Ate alone. Said she was tired. May 16th, she wore makeup to the grocery store. Never does. Spent 11 minutes in the bathroom before leaving. No kiss goodbye. June 2nd, phone buzzed at 2:14 a.m. She turned it face down, slid it under the blanket, laughed silently. She stopped flipping. I didn't speak. She looked up at me, and her eyes were glassy again, but not from sadness. From shock. You were keeping track? She whispered. No, I said. I was trying to hold on. I was trying to find something real before it all fell apart. But every time I reached out, I got cut. She set the notebook down like it was radioactive. I didn't know it was that bad. I laughed once. Not cruelly. Just out of pure disbelief. That's the problem, I said. You didn't know, because you didn't ask. You didn't notice. You didn't want to. For a long while, she just stood there, breathing, blinking, folding her arms and unfolding them again. I could tell she was trying to assemble a defense, trying to justify, trying to turn guilt into something more manageable. But then something shifted. She picked up the notebook again. She opened to a random page. And she read. Quietly. Without arguing. And I watched her unravel. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel anything. Because I knew what was coming next. She would say the words I'd been waiting to hear for months, maybe years. But this time, I wasn't sure I'd believe them. And when she finally did speak, it wasn't what I expected at all. That moment changed everything again. She held the notebook like it was a living thing, something that might bite her if she turned the page too quickly. I watched her eyes move across each entry, watched the way her mouth tightened, her fingers trembled slightly, and her chest rose and fell in short, panicked breaths. She was seeing a version of herself she'd never been forced to look at. Not the woman in her Instagram posts or the smiling wife at dinner parties. The version I lived with. The version who slowly dismantled me, one dismissal at a time. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. Croaky, like her throat had dried out trying to keep it all inside. I didn't realize you were so lonely. It wasn't an apology. It was an observation. Like commenting on the weather after a hurricane had already leveled your home. I didn't respond. I didn't want to fill the silence for her this time. She set the notebook down gently on the countertop, but her hand hovered above it like she wasn't ready to let go. Maybe she thought touching it longer would make her seem more invested, more remorseful. But I knew better. Miranda had always been more interested in being perceived as the right kind of person than actually being her. I just thought you were tired of me, she said after a moment. That you didn't want to try anymore. That's why she trailed off. She didn't say his name. Not that it mattered anymore. You wanted a way out, I said quietly. But you didn't want to be the villain. So you made me into one. That one stung her. I could tell. But she didn't deny it. I didn't mean for it to get that far with him, she finally admitted, sitting down slowly at the dining table like her legs had given out. It started off small. Messages. Flirting. He said things you hadn't said in years. I blinked at her. Did you ever stop to think why I stopped saying them? She glanced up, confused. I stopped because you looked at me like I was an inconvenience. Like every word I spoke was interrupting your life. I'd compliment you, and you'd nod without hearing it. I'd try to be close, and you'd flinch like affection was a burden. She dropped her gaze. That silence again. She didn't deny it this time either. Then she said something so bizarre, so unfiltered, I wasn't sure I heard it right. Maybe I was trying to push you away, to see if you'd still fight for me. It wasn't just a slap in the face. It was a confession of cruelty. A test. A sick one. She didn't want me gone. She wanted proof I would crawl through her rejection just to earn her love again. I almost laughed. You pushed me off a cliff just to see if I'd climb back up, I said. But you never looked down to see if I survived the fall. She started crying again. But this time, I didn't feel bad. I'd cried enough for both of us for years. She could drown in her own tears now. I wouldn't be the lifeboat. I want to fix it, she whispered. I want to try again. Really try. I stood still for a long time. Then I walked over to the notebook and picked it up. Flipped to the very last entry. Dated that morning. June 10th. She finally saw the truth. I finally told her. But I don't know if there's anything left to save. She killed it softly. Not with another man, but with silence, neglect, indifference. I don't miss the version of her I knew recently. I only miss the ghost of the woman I married. I closed the notebook and tucked it under my arm. She looked at me like I was supposed to say something profound, or maybe throw it all in the trash and wrap her in a grand forgiving hug. But instead I said, "There's something else you don't know." She looked up, startled. I nodded slowly. This whole time, someone else knew. And they've been watching everything. Her face went pale. Who? She asked, almost breathless. I smiled, not cruelly, but with a strange sadness. I'll show you. Because the truth wasn't just between her and me anymore. There was a third person, and that changed everything. Her eyes widened as soon as I said it. Someone else knows. That sentence pulled the color right out of her face. I didn't need to raise my voice or flash any anger. I just said it flatly, truthfully, like a statement of weather. Who? She asked again, more desperately now, like the air in the room had turned to water and she couldn't breathe through it. I turned and walked upstairs without answering. I could hear her footsteps behind me, too soft to be determined, but too close to be indifferent. She was following me like a shadow that wasn't sure it still belonged to the figure it once mirrored. When I reached our bedroom, I walked to the corner bookshelf, the one she always thought I used for sentimental junk and clutter. Old records, a wooden bowl we got from the flea market, framed photos of vacations that had long since stopped meaning anything. I moved a stack of vinyls aside and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a small gray box. Nothing fancy. No blinking lights, no wires. Just matte plastic, smooth edges, one button. She leaned forward. What is that? She whispered. You know that burned toast smell you kept complaining about 2 months ago? I asked, turning the box in my hands. That was me learning how to hide smoke detectors that weren't smoke detectors. She blinked. Her jaw dropped slightly. You're lying. I opened the box and showed her. Inside were 2 small flash drives. Identical. Cleanly labeled. One read, kitchen/entry/living. The other, upstairs/phone. Her knees nearly gave out. You recorded me? No, I said. I recorded us. And you made sure you became the main character. She sank down onto the edge of the bed, staring at the drives like they were grenades. You had cameras? In the house. I nodded. Only motion activated. No audio. I'm not a monster. I just wanted to know why I felt so crazy in my own home. And the phone one? Your calls were never recorded. But your screen reflections were. Through the hallway mirror. I waited. Let that one land. Her hands clutched her knees. She looked like a child who had been caught stealing, but was old enough to understand the consequences. So who else saw? She asked. I hesitated. She looked up sharply. Who else saw it? Lowell? I leaned against the wall and finally told her. My brother. She blinked. What? 2 months ago, I started going to his place when I couldn't sleep. He's the one who told me to stop blaming myself. He watched the videos with me. He helped me realize I wasn't losing my mind. You showed him our private life? Yes. Because he helped me see I was living in a prison and calling it marriage. Her face contorted. She didn't know whether to scream or cry. She did a little of both. Her hands clawed into her hair. She stood up, sat back down, walked toward the window and away from it. She looked like she might break the glass just to get away from the reality collapsing around her. Then she turned to me and asked, "So what now? You're going to show them to everyone? Burn my reputation? Post it online?" I shook my head. No, this isn't revenge. This is proof. This is clarity. And this. I held up the flash drive. This is leverage. In case you ever try to twist the story. She looked at me like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. But I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow, like I had finally cut the last string between us. "I'm not here to destroy you," I said, "but I won't let you rewrite what you did." "And what if I just leave?" She snapped suddenly, desperate to reclaim some ground. "What if I just walk out and never come back?" I shrugged. "Then you'll be free. And so will I." Her mouth opened to say something, but then she stopped. Because in that moment, we both understood the marriage had already ended. It had been ending for years. The affair, the letter, the videos, they were just the funeral. But there was one final thing I needed to do before I could let go completely. And it involved someone else. Not her. Not Drew. Someone who had been in the shadows the entire time, watching, waiting, holding a truth that not even I saw coming. And when that truth surfaced, it would shake everything. I thought the final blow would come from her. That she'd scream, pack a bag, break things, run off to Drew one last time. But it didn't happen that way. After I told her everything about the recordings, the notebook, the lawyer, my brother, she didn't leave. She just sat there, still, hollowed out, as if her own weight was suddenly too much to carry. I didn't ask her to explain anything else. I didn't need to hear the timeline of how her lover wrote it. I'd lived through it in slow motion already. What I did need, what I hadn't realized until that final moment, was to speak to someone who had seen all of it from the outside. Not my brother, not a therapist, someone unexpected. So I drove to see her mother. Miranda's mom, Claudia, had always been kind to me. Maybe more kind than she ever was to her own daughter. She'd send me birthday cards with notes that said things like, "Thank you for loving her," and "You're the best thing to happen to our family." For years, I figured she was just being sweet. But now, I wondered if she had known more than she let on. When she opened the door, she blinked twice, surprised to see me. "Lowell," she said gently, "is everything okay?" I didn't say anything for a few seconds. I think my face said enough. She stepped aside and motioned me in. We sat on her patio. The sun was just starting to go down, and the sky looked like it had been painted in soft orange and lavender. "I think it's over," I said quietly. Claudia didn't act shocked. She sipped her tea and looked out at the yard for a long moment before saying, "I wondered how long you'd hold on." That hit me harder than I expected. She turned and looked me in the eyes. "You tried longer than most would have. Don't ever think you failed. You stayed because you believed love was still in there. And that's not weakness. That's loyalty." I swallowed hard. Then she added something I never imagined hearing. She watched her father cheat on me. For years. I stayed too long, too. I think Miranda internalized that, learned how to detach instead of fight. I saw it happening again with you. I should have said something. She reached over and touched my hand. "I'm sorry." I nodded slowly. It wasn't her fault. But somehow, those words healed something I didn't know was still open. She told me I could stay the night if I didn't want to go back. But I declined. I told her I needed to be alone, not because I was hurting, but because I finally felt strong enough to hear my own thoughts. I drove home with the windows down. For the first time in months, I wasn't dreading the silence. I welcomed it. It felt honest. When I walked through the front door, Miranda was sitting on the couch, still in the same clothes. Eyes red, shoulders hunched. She stood up when she saw me. "I'm going to stay at a hotel," she said quietly. "I think you need space." I nodded. That was the first thing she'd said all week that made any sense. She walked past me with a small overnight bag. At the door, she stopped and looked back. "I was cruel," she said. "I don't expect forgiveness. But I hope someday you find something better than what I gave you." Then she left. And just like that, the air shifted. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt open. That night, I sat down at the kitchen table with the notebook again. I flipped to the last page, the one I hadn't written on yet. I grabbed a pen. June 12th, she left. And this time, I didn't chase. I'm not broken. I'm clearing space. For peace. For the version of myself I used to like. For the love I still believe I deserve. Today is the first day I feel light again. Weeks passed. I didn't see her. I didn't need to. I started walking more. Joined a book club. Even took a trip by myself up the coast. Ate breakfast alone in diners with no headphones in. Just me and the world, finally quiet enough to hear. One morning, a barista at a coffee shop smiled and handed me a latte with a heart drawn in the foam. "First time here?" she asked. I nodded, smiled back. And for the first time in what felt like years, I meant it when I said, "Yeah, first time." It was the beginning of something new, something clean, something mine, and I was ready for it.